Hi guys, welcome back to Wentworth Life, the YouTube channel that talks everything Wentworth. If you're new to the channel, then hit that subscribe button right now for all future updates. And, as usual, if you stick around until the end of the video, I will be responding to some of your comments from one of my previous videos. Right then, how are we all doing? I hope you are all well. Seeing as a lot of you enjoyed my last video of the top 10 season 8 moments, I thought it would be fitting to do the same for all seasons of the show while we wait for the new season. So, let's take a little trip down memory lane with one of my favourite seasons with the top 10 moments from season 7. So starting us off at number 10, we have Boomer's Day Out. So we finally got to see a little bit more of Boomer's history. I mean, up until this point, we didn't really know much about what Boomer's life was on the outside, or where she came from. And the only family member that ever came to visit Boomer was her sister Trina, and that was way back in season 2. So Boomer had been granted a day release with her mum, May. So when May came to pick Boomer up from the prison, it was already starting to give off the impression that not all was right between Boomer and her mum. You could clearly see that Boomer wasn't close with her mum at all, but it was almost like Boomer did want to be close to her mum. She craved it, but she never got it. They end up back at Boomer's home where she grew up, and this is when we learn that May used to be an alcoholic, but she tells Boomer that she is now off the grog and she's been going to AA meetings at the local church, although Boomer and myself smell a rat. In a later scene, we learn that Boomer had quite a few different stepdads while she was growing up, and it was heavily implied that one or two were probably abusive. Boomer ends up then having an argument with her mum, but when they finally make up, her mum takes her to the beach for an ice cream and all seems well. However, later on, when May takes Boomer shopping, little does Boomer know that her mum is shoplifting a load of baby formula and tries to get Boomer to be the getaway driver. But when Boomer refuses to drive, the pair of them are caught and are both sent back to Wentworth. Poor Boomer. Coming in at number 9, we have Mari tries to kill Ruby. So, Mari found out that Ruby was the person who killed her son Danny, and she wanted revenge. It's everything that she's ever wanted to do since she arrived at Wentworth, avenge her son's murder. So Ruby tries to explain to Mari what happened was that her son Danny raped her friend, and when she lashed out and hit him, she didn't actually mean to kill him, it was an accident, but Mari is refusing point blank to believe that her son is a rapist. Later on, Mari ends up drugging Ruby's food in the dining room, and Ruby starts to feel like she's going to faint, and so Rita thinks, oh god, Ruby's about to have a fit. So Ruby is then taken to the medical unit. Mari then cuts her own arm with a piece of glass in order to get herself put into the medical unit. So when they're both alone and Ruby is fast asleep, Mari takes this opportunity to grab a kettle or a jug or whatever it was she picked up, and she gets ready to smash it over her head. But just before she gets the chance, Vera and the officers walk in just in time. That was a close call. Coming in at number 8, we have Rita and Vera's bond. Now, this was such a great moment from season 7. Ruby had been rushed into hospital after her brain aneurysm, and things were not looking good for her. And when Mr. Jackson refused to let Rita go to the hospital to visit Ruby, and with Mari throwing a few snide remarks, Rita has a complete breakdown and she tries to escape over the fence. And of course, she was never going to get past the barbed wire, and in a fit of rage, Rita purposely cuts herself on the barbed wire, which totally shocks everyone, including Vera, who starts to show real emotion for Rita. In a later scene, while Rita is in the slot, she's singing a haunting song in the dead of night, and Vera is helplessly watching on the security cam. She ends up then helping Rita by sneaking her out of the prison in the middle of the night to the hospital to see Ruby. Now, this is where they both bond, and Vera's telling Rita that she's scared about being a mum, and Rita's reassuring her that she will be an amazing mum. And then she ends up putting her hand on Vera's stomach and feeling the baby kick. It was such a lush scene between these two characters, and I think Rita will never forget the favour that Vera did for her. Rolling in at number 7, Vera is taken hostage by Kylie. So when season 7 started, it started with a bang, in more ways than one. In episode 1, new inmate Kylie arrived, about the same time as Mari when she's coming back from her court. Mari decides to use Kylie to try and get Kylie to take out Kaz, after Kaz flushes Kylie's drugs down the sink. So Mari gives Kylie a load of drugs, and while Kylie's all pumped up, she makes a shiv and she heads over to Kaz's unit and starts to try to attack her. Kaz manages to defend herself, but just when it looks like Kylie is about to stab her, Miss Smiles and another officer come in and they try to restrain her, but she manages to get away, and she ends up running down the corridor and she ends up bumping into Vera and takes Vera hostage with the shiv. Kylie threatens to cut Vera's baby out if Miss Miles doesn't open the door. So Kylie and Vera, they end up in the yard in front of all the women and the officers, and Jake tells Kylie to let Vera go. Dr. Miller then arrives on scene and he manages to talk Kylie down and gets her to drop the shiv. Vera then manages to break free from her, and this is the moment when Vera decided that it's now time to step down as governor for the moment while I'm pregnant. Wise decision, Vera. This was an absolutely tense scene. I remember I was on the edge of my seat, so brilliant scene. Flying in at number 6, it's a bit of a sad one now, but Kaz is murdered. Now, I think we were all gutted when this happened. I mean, Kaz grew on me, she grew on a lot of fans, which to be fair is quite a big thing to achieve after the loss of B. Smith. Kaz had big shoes to fill, and it might have taken her a little bit of time to get her mojo, but fans ended up falling in love with Kaz. And just before Kaz is murdered, she's telling Dr. Miller that she's found peace with herself and she now knows how to support the women going forward. And before Kaz gets a chance to become this new person, her throat is cruelly sliced by a mysterious hooded person. Kaz tries to hold her neck to stop the blood, but it's no good. Blood keeps on pouring and gushing out, and she hits the ground and she tries to leave a message in her own blood, but it's too late. Kaz takes a final breath on the floor all alone, and what makes this scene more iconic is the fact that Kaz's last final scene ends with her right hand in a pool of blood, symbolising the Red Right Hand group, and it was definitely a sad day for Kaz fans. Okay, coming in at number 5, we have Ali kills Sean. So we learnt in the final episode of season 7 that it was indeed Sean Brody who was the one who killed Kaz. So Sean had taken the prison hostage and he was trying to get Mari out of the prison. But Mari wanted to take Ali with her, even though Ali wanted absolutely nothing to do with Mari at this stage. But in a tense scene, Ruby starts to goad Mari before she gets a chance to escape. So Mari grabs Sean's gun and chases after Ruby through the corridor. Rita is waiting around the corner and knocks the gun out of Mari's hand, and they have a little bit of a struggle before Mari ends up elbowing Rita in the face and ends up grabbing Ruby armed with a shiv. She goes to slice open Ruby's neck, I think, before Ali then shoots Mari in the leg. She then turns around and Ali sees Sean right behind her. She points the gun at him and tells him that he killed Kaz, and she then ends up shooting him in the head in a brutal bloody scene when he starts to mock her. Big mistake, Sean. It's a fantastic scene and it was extremely tense. I mean, it was part of the Siege season final, so this episode will always go down as one of the best episodes in the history of Wentworth. And coming in at number 4 is Vera dead. So, sticking with the Siege episodes just for a moment, and the writers of Wentworth decided to leave us hanging on an absolutely crazy cliffhanger at the end of episode 9. In fact, I would go as far to say that it was probably one of the most shocking cliffhangers we have ever had. I mean, Sean Brody had just taken the women in the laundry hostage along with Linda and Vera, but Sean, he wanted to get himself and Mari out of the prison, and when Mr. Jackson doesn't play ball, he then decides to shoot someone. So he first goes over and points the gun at Ali, but he then changes his mind and points it at Linda Miles before looking slightly to the right at Vera, and he then points the gun at her, and bearing in mind Vera is heavily pregnant at this point. Sean radios through to Will and tells him to release the lockdown or he will shoot Vera, but Will tells him to give himself up, and in an absolutely terrifying, tense moment, he ends up firing the gun, ending the episode with all the women screaming for their lives in the background, and even Mari is looking shocked at what Sean has just done. So we were then left hanging for a whole week, not knowing whether if Vera and the baby were dead or not, but when the next episode finally did come around, it was revealed that Sean had actually killed Costa instead of Vera. I think Sean realised that Vera is probably his most valuable hostage, but like I said, this was one of the most biggest cliffhangers we ever had, and I think a lot of us needed a vodka after that one. And at number 3, we have Ray is murdered. And I tell you what this list has made me realise is the fact we had a lot of deaths in season 7. Anyway, back in episode 1, Rita had agreed to marry her partner Ray. Now, Rita was worried because she had been an undercover cop and she was worried about payback, and she didn't want to see Ray harmed because Rita had probably fallen for him. She tried telling him to go, not to visit, and just to move on with someone else, but he just kept on coming back and not giving up on Rita. So they decided in the end to get married in the prison. So the happy day arrives and it all seems happy and joyful, but something bad is about to happen. While Rita is waiting for Ray with the girls, Ray arrives outside the prison on his motorbike, and just before he enters the prison, another bike comes around the corner and behind him. And when Ray turns around, the person on the bike fires 2 shots right at him in the chest before riding away. It was then up to Vera to tell Rita the bad news on her wedding day, which was devastating. I think we were all led to believe that Mari set this one up in revenge for Rita killing Drago. I mean, I'm not sure if this was ever confirmed, but the guy who killed Ray was definitely the same guy who had been coming to visit Mari, so Mari definitely had something to do with it. Poor Rita. And coming in at number 2, we have one of the most saddest scenes ever in Wentworth, and that is Boomer kills Liz. So poor Liz had been diagnosed with dementia and she was progressing really badly towards the end of season 7. She had already asked Kaz if she could help her die when things got too bad, and I believe Kaz had agreed to this. She was going to do this and help end Liz's suffering when it got too much. But poor Kaz was killed off back in episode 4. So Liz had decided to ask Boomer, but Boomer had always said no. She had parole coming up and she didn't want to mess it up. But just after the siege, Liz sadly suffers a stroke and she ends up with something called locked-in syndrome. She can hear everything that's going on around her, but she can no longer communicate anymore and is bedbound. It's very heartbreaking to see Liz like this. We'd all grown with her from the first episode of season 1, and this also proved too much for Boomer because Boomer decides to end Liz's suffering. She tells Liz that she loves her and then smothers her with a pillow until she's passed away. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house from anyone during this scene, especially with that emotional high-pitched music in the background. It was so sad to see Liz go, but at least the character is at peace now. And landing in at our top spot at number 1, we have Kaz bombs Mari. This was literally my favourite scene from the whole of season 7, and believe me, there were a lot of great scenes from this season, but this one topped it all for me. The feud between Kaz and Mari was on the boil, and when Mari gets Ali to smuggle in some drugs for her, Ali ends up being a bit weak on herself and she tries to take the drugs for herself, but Kaz catches Ali doing it just before she uses uses the drugs. So Ali breaks down and tells Kaz that it's for Mari, and this pushes Kaz over the edge. She goes to a cell and grabs a homemade bomb that her and Rita had made earlier on in the episode, and heads for Mari's cell. So Kaz sees Mari in the cell alone, lights the fuse of the bomb, rolls it into Mari's cell. So just as Mari realizes what is going on, Kaz manages to lock the door, leaving Mari trapped and screaming at Kaz through the glass. And just before the bomb goes off, Kaz walks away from the door, and then boom, the bomb goes off, and Kaz literally just casually walks off, strutting his stuff like nothing has happened. It was such a fantastic scene, accompanied by a fantastic song playing in the background, and it was really, really great to see Kaz go all badass. And that was the top 10 moments from Season 7. So what did you guys think of Season 7? I know that it was one of my favourites, and just making this list alone reminds me of how good Season 7 was. It's definitely up there as one of the best seasons to date, but let me know in the comments box below, what was your number 1 moment from Season 7 and why? Let me know in the comments box below. And of course, on that note, it's now time for some comment replies. So we have Valley Boy 94. So many great moments as always, but I think mine has to be that finger chop. Oh, brutal, Valley Boy, brutal. But yes, it was a great scene, wasn't it? Thank you for your comment. And we have Michelle 82478. My top scenes were every single one with Lou Kelly. I love her character. Kate Box is absolutely gorgeous. Yes, Michelle, I really do like Lou Kelly, and I don't think we've got to see the best or the baddest of her yet. They're saving that for the final chapter next year, but I do love Lou, and the fact that she does have this emotional thing inside her that nobody gets to see apart from Reb is fascinating. So yes, I'm looking forward to seeing how her character plays out next year. Thank you for your comment. And we have Jessie Mia. I really hope that Ali survives. I'd really love to see her in the next season. And I'd love to see Judy getting killed. Yes, Jessie, I agree with you. Judy has to get her comeuppance. Hopefully she will die a horrible death. Wouldn't surprise me if Anne Reynolds kills her eventually. But yes, fingers crossed that Ali survives. I'm sure she survives. I think she'll be paralysed, but I think she'll survive. Thank you for your comment. And we have Josh Sims. I wonder if we will ever see Erica Davidson and Frankie and Bridget again. Well, Josh, we will never see Erica Davidson again. I don't think she's even been mentioned since episode 1 of season 2. So unfortunately, Erica's storyline has finished. She was only part of season 1, and they never brought her back after that, so there would be no reason to bring her back at this late stage. And as for Frankie and Bridget, well, I'd love to see them make an appearance in the final chapter. Fingers crossed on that one. We're probably more likely to see them over Erica, but thank you for your comment, and thank you all again for your amazing comments. As usual, you are all amazing. Keep them coming, and maybe your comment will feature in my next video. So thank you all for sticking around. If you've made it this far into the video, make sure you smash that subscribe button, because I will be back with a top 10 season 6 moments video very soon, and you will not want to miss it. So thank you all for watching, guys. I will see you all very soon.